Okay, so today I am going to show you how to use Voyant tools to explore the textual data, if we want to look at Jane Eyre that way, to look at Jane Eyre as a piece of textual data. So I am going to first open Jane Eyre in Project Gutenberg. The link for this file is in the Voyant instruction sheet. I want to copy the entire text of Jane Eyre, and there is some extra stuff, some publishing data from Project Gutenberg at both the top and the bottom of the text. But I'm just going to do a Command A on a Mac. That would be Control A on a PC to copy all of the text. So that just stands for Command All. And then after I've selected all of it, I'm pressing Command C for copy. And then again on a PC, that would be Control C. And now that I have all of the text highlighted, it's a lot. You don't want to scroll through all of it if you don't have to. Then I am taking that text. I am going to the Voyant Tools window, which I opened ahead of time. The link to that is also in the assignment sheet. And I am pasting that into this text box. And I'm going to do that just by hitting Command V. And if you're on a PC, that will be Control V. Okay, so we have the entire novel now in the text box for Voyant. However, what we want to examine is just the text of the novel. I don't want to include in my analysis any kind of analysis of Project Gutenberg's legal disclaimers or anything like that. So what I am doing now is manually going through and deleting everything at the top and bottom that is not part of the novel Jane Eyre. There we go. End of this Project Gutenberg ebook, Jane Eyre. Oops, I say it twice. Okay. And then scrolling up, there we can see we talked about the end of the novel. The end of the novel belonging to St. John, the words being his from a letter he wrote to Jane. So we've deleted everything from the end. Now we need to go all the way to the top and delete things from the top that are not the actual novel. And I'm getting rid of things from the title page as well. Well, we can include the preface, I guess. So actually, let's just go to start of the Project Gutenberg text, deleting that. Produced by David. Okay, so I'm starting right here. This would be information transcribed from the title page. Now we have only the text of the novel and not all of Project Gutenberg's legal disclaimers about what the text can be used for and what the text came from. All right, so now that I have that in the text box, I'm going to click Reveal. And this is actually a pretty quick process that Voyant takes all of the text and does a statistical analysis on it for us. All right, that was quick. All right, so what we have here are 5 boxes of information that the Voyant tools spit out for us. On the far left here, we have a word cloud. I'm sure you've seen word clouds before. Pulls out the most commonly used words in the novel, and the larger the word being used is, the more often it occurs, the higher the frequency of its use in the novel. So we can see here that the most commonly used words in the novel are Mr. and said. Now, when most people use Voyant, they only use it in a very limited capacity and only ask students to look at the word cloud. That is really underutilizing the tool. So the word cloud is a great place to start, and you should definitely look at it to try to decide what it is that you would like to look at in the novel. But it's really only the beginning. In this middle box here, this top middle box, we have the full text of the novel. And it's really only relevant as it pertains to what's going on in this third box, the box on the top right. The box on the top right divides the novel into 10 equal segments. Now, this tool does not think like a human being. This is a computing tool. It thinks in quotations, like a computer. So what it did is it divided the total number of words in the book by 10 and put them in 10 equal segments. And you can see patterns for those 10 segments displayed here. Now, when I assigned the book to you, that's not obviously how I go about breaking up the reading for the class, right? I broke it up by location for, the 6 different places that Jane was. And a lot of times that corresponded in part to where volumes ended and began. It's a 3-volume novel. But the computer's not doing that, okay? The computer is just saying we have X number of words, we're going to divide that by 10. Great, now we have charts. So you need to think about the difference between how a computer thinks and how a human thinks when you are using this tool. The productive part is how we can take what a computer does and combine it with what a human does and forge new paths of analysis. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this very important third box in a second. This fourth box down here, the bottom left box, just gives us some really basic sort of summary of the material that we see elsewhere. So we see how many words the novel has in total. It has close to 190,000 words. And of those, we have almost 13,000 unique words. So obviously, every time the word Mr. appears, it does not count as a unique word. In that 13,000, Mr. is only counted once. We talked and joked a little bit about how long Victorian sentences are. And I probably quoted even, that the average number of words per sentence in the novel is between 19 and 20 words per sentence. That's a lot. And then here it gives us a preview of the 5 most common words and how often they're used. So the word said is most common in the novel. It's used 584 times. The word Mr. is the second most used word in the novel at 544. The word like is used 403 times. That's interesting because like can be used to mean lots of different things, right? The word like could be used as a simile to say that something is like something else, or it could be used as a verb to say that Jane likes Rochester. So this is a computer and it's not able to make those grammatical distinctions. So that's something you need to think about when you're writing an analysis as well. Jumping over then to the 5th and final box down here, we're going to leave it on the contexts tab for now. Every time a particular word is used, this contexts box will give you the context in which it's used. So right now, it's selected to give every instance of the term or word said. And it shows you what is to the left of that word on the page and what is to the right of that word on the page. You can hear my cat singing in the background. Can't possibly get through something without being serenaded by Sappho. So this can help you pinpoint individual instances in which the word is being used, so that you can make some good inferences about how it's being used. This would, for instance, help you when you were trying to say, okay, so when the word like is used, see, I just clicked on the word like. Actually, I think we have to type it in here to get... why did I do that? Sorry, give me 1 second here. What I want is for... Sorry, this little screen recording thing is... I think if I just click hide, there we go. That's why I got confused for a second. So if I type like here, so it's designed so that all of the boxes can do something different on their own. So just because I typed something up here, you could see, it showed me the patterns in the novel for just the word like, but it did not change what was happening in this fifth box here. So all these different control panels can be run separately. All right, so now I made this bottom box show me every time the word like was used so we can look at individual instances. So the world may not like to see these ideas dissevered. So that's from the preface, that sentence, and that's like being used as a verb. We have other instances here. Here's one down here, idea of my own, shadowy, like all the half comprehended notions. That's an instance of it being used to create a simile, not as a verb. So in this bottom right-hand box, we have a way of really zooming into individual uses of words, whereas the rest of the boxes in Voyant show us bigger picture information. And it's the marriage of all this bigger picture information with individual usages that enable us to use the tool to its greatest advantage. Okay, so let's just look at what we have here. I put like in this box so we can trace how the usage of the word like changes over time. Like isn't, personally, I don't think the best example of a word to write about, especially on its own. But since I have it up here, we can just briefly talk about how this chart works. We can see that the word like is used most often in the first section of the novel. And so we know that's within about the first 19,000 words of the novel, it's used most often. And from there on out, it's in a relatively steady stream back and forth of how often it's used. Now, how this can be helpful, even though this word I don't think is particularly fruitful for a potential analysis, is that I can use it to demonstrate for you how this middle box works. So if I click on that, I can see where it starts keeping track. And it makes sense that it's the first segment of the novel. So it shows me where the novel starts in the middle box. But to find where segment 1 ends and segment 2 begins, I can click at the beginning of segment 2. There we go. And of course, it's completely arbitrary, right? I mean, it's as a computer. It just divides up the number of words. It's not thinking about logical breaks in the text. Where does a chapter end? Where does a volume end? That's not how it works. It's just counting the number of words and dividing by 10. So we can see here that it's ending section 1 and beginning section 2 when the girls are at Lowood. And this is the conversation where Helen is explaining to Jane what Lowood Institution is, what a charity school is, how they're paying only a very small amount of money to be there. Okay, and if we want to see where section 3 begins, we could click the beginning of section 3 and see. It looks like she is leaving. Okay, to see here. Not far from Thornfield, so she is on her way from Lowood to Thornfield, and imagining what Mrs. Fairfax looks like, right? So that's how you determine which segments of the novel are corresponding to which parts of the book. All right, so hopefully at this point you have a basic sense of how these 5 different boxes on your screen operate. And the next thing to do would be just to give you an example of what this kind of Voyant analysis could look like. So let's just pick an example here. Let's look at the word. Trying to think of a good one. Let's look at, I think I give the example of the word sir, actually, in my assignment sheet when I rewrote it this time. So let's look at the word sir and how the use of the word sir changes throughout the novel. It's also one of the more commonly used examples. Okay. So unlike the word like, where we had a big spike in section one, but then, it varied back and forth, but relatively slightly over the course of the novel, we see some big jumps in the amount and frequency of the word sir. And our job is to try to figure out how this makes sense in terms of what we know about the novel, what we know about its plot, and where the characters are entering and exiting. So early on, in segments 1 and 2, we have a very low incidence of the word sir, which might be a little bit surprising, given that Jane would have been talking to her cousin John Reed in Brocklehurst at that time, but her conversations with them are pretty few and far between. Um, so even though she would have been deferential to them, and in some cases, much more Brocklehurst than John would have used the title Sir with them, the incidence of that word is very low at that part. But we get to segment 3, which we just looked in this middle part to find out that's when she's arriving at Thornfield, and the use of the word Sir just skyrockets. And then in segment 4, sorry, one of these problems is getting this, there we go, the little pop-ups to go away. Segment 4, it dips. Sections 5 and 7, it is really up there. 6, it has a slight dip. Really just catapults in segments 8 and 9, and then shoots up again in segment 10. So if you chose to look at the word sir, you would be looking at this chart and trying to figure out what the story of the word is in the novel. So how does the story of the word correspond to the story of the novel as a whole? Just to give you an example of the ways that we need to be sure we're using our human brains to correspond with what the computer the information the computer is spitting out at us. It's a common thing for students to talk about how in section 10, which is the end of the novel, and her Jane's reunion with Rochester, it's a relatively common reading for students to look at section 10 and say, she's back with Rochester and she's using the word sir a lot. And so, it talks about how she's being deferential towards him. And students have sometimes, in an analysis, talked about how that might diminish a sense of the equality that we talked about Jane and Rochester achieving in their relationship at the end of the novel. But if we really zoom in and look at the way the word sir is used at the end of the novel, we can see that that's not really always the case, because Jane can use the word sir in a bit of a mocking tone. I mean, she often uses it at the end when she's making fun of him a little bit, when she's saying Rochester looks like Vulcan, um, forging iron in hell. And so just because the word sir is used doesn't necessarily mean that Jane is being deferential towards Rochester, and that any claims about equality are just completely shot because of what the word frequency has revealed. So you can see how when you're asked by someone just to use the word cloud, how you could have very different results than if you use Voyant to its fullest potential and all the abilities that it allows you to explore. So the options for the assignment is to look at 2 different words and write 2 different mini essays on those words. You can also do a screencast like I'm doing to talk through the 2 different words that you use. And I've also given you the option if you want to look at sets of words, but those still have to be two separate essays. So for instance, um, if you were to take the example I'm doing, you shouldn't use sir because that's what I just used to discuss. But in the past, like students would sometimes do an essay that looked at the words sir and master as a pair. It typed them both in here to look at their trends. Whoops, that's not what I meant. There we go. To look at their trends and how the words worked together in conjunction over time. One thing, of course, to remember there is that this is a relative chart, right? So just because I don't like how it made both words pink in that case. It doesn't normally do that. Usually you can tell them apart better. Just 1 second here. There we go. I don't know why it made them the same color that first time. It's just important to keep in mind that when you look at two words in the same chart, it can distort, how they look. So I recommend looking at each word in isolation as well as the words together if you're going to look at a word pair. So looking at master by itself, it's even off the chart. It's pretty crazy. Like, obviously it looks different than looking at master and sir together like that, right? So if you're going to look at words and compare them with each other for one of your mini essays, you should look at them together, but also look at their individual charts to be sure your ideas about them aren't getting distorted by the relativity in the statistics between the words. So your option would be, really there's three ways to approach this. You can either write one mini essay each on one individual word. So write one mini essay on the word room and one on the word day. Or you could write a mini essay on two different pairs of words. So even though I said don't use sir and master, that's the example that's in my head. So I'm just going to give that one mini essay on sir and master, and then one mini essay on day and night. You could look at word opposites. Or you could do one single word and then one word pair. So you could do day and night for one mini essay, and then just the word hand for the second mini essay. So you also, as a final note, are not limited to using only the words in the word cloud, even though that's, shows the words with the greatest frequency. So if you want to examine a word that doesn't appear in the word cloud, it's used a little bit less, but still used to a degree that you think is significant, so, more than one or two times for sure, then you can do that. You can type in literally any word that appears in the novel here and get a result. So the word moon. No one has done moon in the history of my teaching this, but I would love to see it. By the way, the difference between this drop-down menu here, where you have moon with an asterisk with 62 instances versus moon without an asterisk with 43 instances, the difference there is that this first instance captures any word that begins with moon. So that encompasses moon, moonlight, moonrise, moonbeams, moonless, and moonlit. Whereas moon without an asterisk just means moon by itself with nothing after it. And you can do that either way. You just need to be clear about what you're choosing to do. All right. So I think that should be enough information, especially in conjunction with all of your written instructions for you to be able to complete the assignment. But you can definitely let me know if you have any questions, and I will try to answer those.